Hello, hello, hello. So you guys are going to be starting a project this week, and it might take us into next week, and that's okay if that happens. But I wanted to, instead of giving you the directions in person, I wanted you to have a video to use so that you could go back to it if you needed to, or if you had questions or wanted to reference something, you could go back to this if you needed to. So I'm going to kind of take you through the steps of your project. You have been hired as a magazine publisher, and you're going to create your own e-magazine. So an e-magazine just basically means it's a magazine online. So here you can see all of your directions in your assignment. And your assignment is to create an informational magazine about a topic of your choice. So you get to pick. You get to inform your audience about anything that you'd like, whether it's about math or reading or dance or soccer. It can be about anything that you'd like. You pick. I am not giving you a topic. You pick. Okay? You can choose to focus on a really broad topic, like maybe, I don't know, space, or you can pick a very specific topic, like maybe one particular planet that you're really passionate about learning. I don't know. It's up to you. You're picking. Whatever you pick, you need to have at least 5 different articles, each with a different subtopic relating back to the main topic. So I'll show you what I mean in a second. So if I were doing this project and I wanted to, and if I were filling this out as a student, my topic would be the Great Chicago Fire, because I know a lot about that right now. I could have also picked dance, but I feel like I picked dance a lot, so I'm going to pick the Great Chicago Fire. Now, each of your 5 articles will be written with a different text structure in mind. And we've talked a little bit about text structures this week, but we really talked about it a few weeks ago. So you might need to refresh your brain with what some of these text structures are. And I do have a list of each of these text structures on an anchor chart that you can use, or you can look in your blend space to find the description of these text structures. Okay, so these would be the subtopics of the Great Chicago Fire, or whatever your topic is. So I'm choosing to write my entire e-magazine about the Great Chicago Fire, and then each one of these is going to be a story, basically. So if I were doing a description, it would literally just be a description of the Great Chicago Fire. That's what I would do. It would just be a description of the Great Chicago Fire. I would be explaining when it started, when it ended, how long it lasted for, what it looked like before, what it looked like after. If I were doing problem and solution, my problem would certainly, be the drought and how that caused the fire. Drought causes fire in Chicago. Solution is Chicago must rebuild. Okay, so my problem is very clear. There's a drought in Chicago, and the solution would be that Chicago must rebuild. So that would be an entirely different story. So right now I have one story in my e-magazine about the description of the Chicago fire. My next story would be about the problem and solution. My next story would be about sequence and order. So maybe this becomes a timeline of events that led up to fire / happened during fire. Because remember, sequence is in order. It's a chronological order, right? So what happens at the beginning, what happens in the middle, and what happens at the end. So maybe that's a timeline story. Cause and effect, maybe this is where I talk about my theory for how the fire started. I think that Louis M. Cohen caused the fire. The effect is that he went to jail. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. If I'm comparing and contrasting, maybe I'm comparing and contrasting Chicago today versus 1871 when the fire started. That's an entirely different article. Okay? Remember that you are choosing the topic and you're choosing the 5 stories that you're writing about. It does not need to be about the Chicago fire. I just chose that as an example for you. Okay? So I have my topic, what my whole magazine is going to be about, and then I have my 5 text structures or stories that I'm going to put into my e-magazine. In addition to those 5 stories, within your stories, you're also going to need to include at least 2 pictures. You can take them from the internet or draw them. You're going to need captions for each of the pictures that you use. You'll need a diagram, a map, a timeline, or a chart. Please notice that it says or. You do not need all of those things. And I would say maybe that a timeline would probably be your best option, considering you have to do sequence and order anyway, and timeline gives you that time. You will need a glossary including subject-specific vocabulary, meaning that if I have a glossary for the Great Chicago Fire, maybe I put in my glossary what a drought is, right? I have to put in the glossary the definition of a drought because maybe my readers don't know what a drought is. So that's an example of the glossary. And then types of print. You have to have multiple types of print. So bold, italics, highlighted, and also a sidebar. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. I'm going to wait on this part this bottom part because I want to focus on just this stuff so far. So you're going to, in your blend space, you're going to find a link to a website called Weebly. I think that's how you pronounce it anyway. And it will look like this. It is a Google affiliated site, so you'll need to use Chrome, and I'm already logged in, but when you log in, you'll be asked to allow Google Chrome to use your credentials, and then you'll name your website or your e-magazine. So my website is literally called missgonzalesemagazine.weebly.com. You can call it the same thing with your name, or you can call it the title of whatever you're going to write about. It's up to you. On your platform, you will see something that looks like this. So I created the title of my e-magazine, The Great Chicago Fire, and my subtitle is Your Go-To Guide for All Things Chicago Fire. I chose to put the Great Chicago Fire scene as my background. You certainly could choose a picture that related to your topic, okay? So going back to this, my topic, the Great Chicago Fire, I have it right here with a subtitle. Okay, I was able to edit all of that just like this. It's very easy. I can click and edit. So then I scroll down and I'm asked to choose a layout, and I have all this stuff over here that I can use to edit my e-magazine. So I can include a picture, a gallery of pictures, a map, a slideshow. I can put a spacer or a divider in. I can add audio, YouTube, Flash, things like that. Okay? So those are all things that you're able to use. I chose to put everything on one page. You can build this however you'd like. If you want to put more than, if you want to make a page for each topic, you can do that up here. Or you can just put everything on one page like I did. Okay? So here's a quick example of description. Remember that I said description, I would just be describing the Great Chicago Fire, and in it I say, the Great Chicago Fire was one of our city's greatest catastrophes. The fire began on October 8th, 1871, and lasted for 2 days, spreading far and wide across the city of Chicago. The fire destroyed everything in its path, eliminating houses, buildings, and schools along the way. The only building that remained standing was the Chicago Water Tower. This building was constructed of stone instead of wood, which is what everything was made of during those times. This is why the water tower was able to sustain the fire and was not destroyed like everything else. The Chicago Water Tower still stands to this day and is the oldest building in the city. So that's my description. You can see it's not very long. It's at least 5 sentences, and that would fulfill the requirement to have description as one of your articles. That's one of my articles. I also chose to put 2 pictures here with 2 captions. Here on the left, you can see that this is the water tower before the Chicago fire, and on the right is the water tower today. And I have 2 captions that I laid right on top of them. So that fills the requirement for having at least 2 pictures with captions for each picture. So already I've checked off 3 things on my list that I need to do, and I just started. So certainly you would keep going. Here's where you can see you can add more articles. You can also make more pages. And your articles would be the problem and solution, the sequence and order, the cause and effect, and the compare and contrast. So whatever topic that you pick, you will need 5 articles using description, problem and solution, sequence and order, cause and effect, and compare and contrast. So say, for example, you chose to do soccer. You could describe the game of soccer. You could talk about how Messi, for your problem and solution, you could talk about how Messi thought he was never going to be able to play soccer, but then he worked through physical therapy, and now the solution, he was finally able to play soccer. If you talked about sequence and order, you could talk about the timeline from when soccer started up until now and how it's changed. So there's a lot of possibilities here, okay? When you're ready to publish, you would hit publish in the upper right hand corner, and it'll ask you if you're sure the first time. I've already done this, so it doesn't ask me. And then in order for you to see it, you'll have your own website link, which you'll see right here. So whatever you name your website, you'll see, and it'll be .weebly.com. You'll click on it and it will take you to your e-magazine. So here's what mine looks like live. And as you can see, I've only really edited this part for you, but you can see that it looks pretty cool. It has a lot of features. Um, and there's a lot you can do with this site. So I challenge you to, be creative, use good word choice, things like that. Okay? So if you have any questions, come find me. Otherwise, you guys are free to get started. And I think this is going to be really, really awesome. And I'm excited to learn all about the topics that you've picked. Good luck.